Welcome in to the Wednesday episode of the 14. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Barry Allen joins me. We got a special guest, though, Chase Parham from rebelgrove.com. He has covered Ole Miss for a long time. They're the best in the business at covering the Rebels, and so that's why we brought him on today to talk a little Rebel baseball, but also some SEC stuff. Chase, welcome to the show, and what I know is a really busy time for you. In addition to SEC baseball, you have moved houses in the meantime. You just picked a great time to do all this. Did you time that intentionally?
Yeah, Chris, we sold our house in November. I've been a nomad for how many ever months before that. Finally bought a house, picked the time to close right here in the middle of postseason baseball. And then in addition to that, Mississippi became Noah's Ark weather. We got 7.9 inches of rain yesterday. So,
Oh, my.
yeah, there's a lot going on, and I'm not going to Tucson because everything's still on Zoom. There's no reason, especially with Omaha potentially around the corner. But the desert would be really nice right now because we are underwater in Mississippi.
Well, I was going to say, you had two schools in your state hosting regionals. Did the groundskeepers get like hazard pay for that?
Well, as NCAA tradition, the only time there was a delay in the Monday final was for a lightning that did not actually happen. We had a 30-minute lightning delay when it did not actually lighten or rain at any point. They delayed the game potentially for the rain to actually get there later in the day, but that was it. So they did a good job. They managed it. It's actually the third Oxford regional in a row that's been dictated or schedule changed by weather a little bit. So yeah, they've been pretty unlucky the first weekend in June as far as rain and getting those postseason tournaments in.
You know, it's funny. I'm up here in Nashville. I was at the Vanderbilt games this weekend, and that's one of the first times in a long time I can remember that Vanderbilt wasn't delayed by rain or something. So it was the opposite for us. I remember just about every regional or super I've ever covered, it seems like rain is always an issue. And by the way, I think it's raining outside my house right now, and it's going to rain most of the week. But fortunately, we didn't deal with that. Chase, before we get into Ole Miss, big news this morning, Jim Schlossnagle at TCU has taken the A&M job. What are your thoughts on that?
It's interesting from both sides. From the Schlossnagle side, I know he went a long way down the road with Mississippi State a couple years ago. Somebody who's been a little frustrated by the commitment at TCU. Basically, I mean, Chris, something you're very familiar with. They haven't been able to go to the extent that maybe Vanderbilt has with some of the recruiting things and different things along those lines, but an incredibly accomplished coach. He's actually Mike Bianco's best friend in the business, Jim is, so that's interesting. He's now in the conference now. But I think it's a good move for him. I think it kind of gives him a little bit of a reset. And, Rob Childress has been out at A&M for a while. Barring some crazy year, he was going to be removed at the end of the year. The AD there, Ross Bjork, somebody I know well, who was at Ole Miss for a long time. He targeted Tim Tadlock first. He offered Tim Tadlock. Tadlock obviously got the lifetime contract at Texas Tech, whatever you want to make of how that worked, and then zeroed in on Schlossnagle pretty quickly. It's Ross's first baseball search because when he was at Ole Miss, he almost fired Mike Bianco in 2018 before they went on the run. They won the SEC tournament, ended up losing to 2019. They finished runner-up in the SEC tournament. They win the regional and then lose to Arkansas in the Supers right before Ross went to A&M. And at that point, he was obsessed with Butch Thompson at Ole Miss. Obviously, Butch had a pretty rough year at Auburn. That's not something he could have done at A&M. But the way they recruit in that area at TCU, he's going to do well at A&M. I think it just adds even more to this conference. I think it makes the West even more complicated than it already was because, A&M's kind of that sleeper program a little bit because they haven't met the expectations you would necessarily expect for their recruiting base, the money they put into that place, the talent in the Houston area, and just the state as a whole. So I think there's a little bit of a sleeping giant there that Jim's going to do a good job, and I think it's good for both parties.
Barry, I want to get your comment on that because TCU, I guess for the last decade, you could make the argument. I'm thinking of the top 5 programs in college baseball. Vanderbilt and Florida certainly on that list. LSU might be on that list, although the Tigers have slumped a little bit lately. Virginia's had its moments. Louisville, for certain, I think would be in that top 5. But you could argue TCU, which has been to Omaha several times, hasn't been to the final in a while. I want to say that came back around the latter part of of 2 decades ago. But he had a good situation at TCU. Not that he doesn't have a great one at A&M too, but it's kind of a gamble anytime you go from one place where it's working pretty well to another place where it could work pretty well too, but the expectations are higher. What are your thoughts on him making that move, Barry?
Well, I think it's a good move for both parts. Like Chase said, he may have maxed out at TCU. He had a really good situation at TCU. He had a really nice home in the Fort Worth area. It was like right across the street from Lupton Stadium. I mean, he could literally walk to work. It was just a really nice setup for him, and he did an incredible job there. Still didn't quite get over the hump. May have had some, issues with, aid that they could get, like Vanderbilt does, that some of the other schools get, that it didn't quite work out at TCU. But I think every year if you sat down and you ate for Omaha, as a lot of people do when the seasons are over, not a lot of those lists over the last 10 years didn't include TCU, and really good program there. In fact, TCU and Texas A&M were bitter rivals the last few years in postseason, and I had the privilege of working one of their super regional series at Lupton Stadium in Fort Worth a number of years ago, and 3 really good games, 2 extra inning games. TCU beat A&M on a Monday night, 13 innings, to go to Omaha, and an Omaha staple, and this is a guy that started his career with at Tulane with Rick Jones, and then went to UNLV and turned UNLV from a nothing into a really good power in the Mountain West Conference. Won 77 games, and then developed that into a nice deal with TCU. He's also a pitching coach at Clemson, so he's got a little bit of that Jack Leggett, John Winkin blood in him, and just a really good coach. I think he's done a really good job over the years, at TCU, and I think A&M was looking for something to, not that Rob Childress was a bad coach, because he wasn't, but I think they were just looking for something a little bit more flashy. And I think Ross Bjork got that in Jim Schlossnagle, and I think he's gonna improve the Aggies, and I think it'll be fun to have him in the SEC for some years to come.
Yeah, Chris, let me butt in real quick one time. What's funny about that too is that it's a little, what have you done for me lately? I'm wondering what TCU obviously was very happy with Jim Schlossnagle, but he'd hit a little bit of a downturn here. He went to the College World Series 4 years in a row from 14 to 17. And then he had a losing record in the Big 12 in 18 and 19. They get back to a national seed this year in 21, and then lose the regional 3 seed Dallas Baptist coming out of there. So it's funny, even at a place like TCU where he's been winning, it shows it's pretty hard to be consistent. It's something that even he struggled with over the last 3 or 4 years potentially.
No, yeah, that's a good point. You kind of think of TCU as the team that's in Omaha every other year, but they did hit a little bit of a down spell. And then, of course, this year we're a national seed, didn't make it out of the weekend. So, yeah, there is that. Sometimes it's just best to maybe move on while you can get a job like that. I don't know what, I'm not saying he was in any kind of trouble at TCU. I don't have any reason to think he was, but you do make a good point with that.
Chase, how much of that do you think? How much do you think of their quick out in the NCAA tournament, did that have any effect on this? He was being courted by A&M. As Florida was 0-2, TCU's 1-2. These are 2 guys, Schlossnagle and O'Sullivan, that are being courted for other jobs. Do you think that had any effect on how those teams played in those regionals?
It definitely looked like Florida played pretty listless. I mean, it felt like no matter what they were, because I thought they were kind of trending in the right direction, and they looked worse than any host team in the country over the course of the weekend. And yeah, look, if you told me TCU was at least aware of this, I would believe it, because I'm not on that beat. I mean, it's not like I talked to Ross much at any point, and I mean, even I had heard for a couple of weeks now that this was basically done once Tadlock had turned it down. So yeah, there's no doubt in my mind that potentially played into TCU over the weekend, because you've got to deal with your coach not only leaving but going to an in-state program, and you're a little bit of at least from a school standpoint, you're looking at A&M, and it's a little bit of an odd deal there from a rival or from just a competitive nature standpoint. So yeah, I think that probably did play a little bit of a role in. I mean, Dallas Baptist, really good program. That was a difficult region, but they did not play well, and it looked like they had kind of phoned it in a little bit.
Chase, let's go to Ole Miss. If that thing's a Disney ride this year, it's Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. You've got pitching injuries. You got Ole Miss losing its ace. You got that string where they lose darn near every weekend series in the middle of the season. You got, the best hitter on the team hitting home runs on one knee. But what was it like, the ups and downs of that beat this year?
What's funny about it is that as the injuries kept mounting, you sort of expected them not to fold, but just to kind of become average. And they never did. I mean, this is a team that only lost back-to-back games twice the entire season and only once since the middle of March. They just kind of kept coming. I mean, I asked Mike Bianco in the post-game press conference after they beat Southern Miss on Monday night. I said, I've been around a good while, Mike. You dealt with more adversity and just more stuff than any other year. And you look up, they win 44 games. They're still playing in a super regional this weekend. They go 18-12 in the SEC with, at times, one starter, if we're honest. I mean, Doug Nikhazy kind of put them on his back and carried them a little bit. Yeah, like you said, Tim Elko missed a month. He's on one ACL. And something that everybody forgets, Max Chofie tore his elbow up the very first week of the season. He pitched one time in Arlington when they were out there in that big tournament in Texas. And since then, they haven't had him. He was their number 2 bullpen guy behind Taylor Broadway coming into the year. So, no, this has been a mix and match deal. This has been something where I told Chris before we started the show, we can talk about decisions in game, what Mike Bianco has done or hasn't done, and kind of where you could have lost or won a game. But managing people, managing injuries, managing expectations, keeping a team level, because baseball, even at the college level where it's 60 games, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. You've got to make sure that kids are showing up every day ready to play. He's done a phenomenal job, along with the captain, of keeping this Ole Miss team locked in, keeping them focused, and just kind of getting to this point. Because when Gunnar Hoagland went out a few weeks ago, somebody who's picked he's projected to be picked in the top 15 picks in the Major League Draft this summer, it looked like maybe the end, because they've had starting pitching issues around, other than he and Nikhazy. And you get a little more out of Derek Diamond, you get a little more out of this guy and this guy and this guy. Mike's pushed so many good buttons in that standpoint that it's been fun to watch. I hate that this is the COVID year, the year where we're all on Zoom, because following these guys at practice, down on the field, we were walking around the dugout at practice and really getting more of a sense of them. It's kind of a storybook deal, as you mentioned. It's something where I think we would have a lot more insight of just how special this has been. I mean, look at this, Chris. They played Monday night in a game where they have to win it or they're done for the year. Jack Doherty started that game. He's a redshirt, or he's a true freshman out of Collierville, Tennessee. He was redshirting until April. He had not participated in a game. He was not good enough in practice to even make the roster. He was redshirting, and now he's starting the game to save your season. I mean, Mike is pulling people out of everywhere, putting uniforms on them, and they're playing Arizona with a chance to go to the College World Series.
Chase, that's not the only guy. You're talking about Doherty that was being redshirted. Didn't have a factor in the regional, but another guy Mike pulled a red shirt off of late in the year was Kemp Alderman, and he hits a walk-off game-winning home run against LSU. It seems like he's punched the right buttons all year long. Is this his best year in the dugout? Do you think this is one of his better coaching seasons that he's had at Ole Miss?
Yeah, and I think he's had a couple of those in the last few years. I think in different ways. I think this is the best overall coaching job he's done. And then I think second around there is the postseason run he did in 19. They had really fallen off. They lost 5 in a row before they won the regular season finale against Tennessee in 19. They end up making a run through Hoover, getting to Sunday, getting through a regional, and they lost in Fayetteville, but they just lost. They lost because Isaiah Campbell was incredibly good on day 1, and they lost because Arkansas had a couple more better players on day 3. He kept them loose, he kept them in it, and he had a hell of a coaching job. And yeah, that's what this has been too. I mean, like I said, he's pushed so many program right buttons. He's managed a roster in a way that he's really never done before, using every piece imaginable. I mean, you look at, right, wrong, arm injury, all that stuff. He threw his Friday and his Saturday starter on Monday just to find a way to get 27 outs. So he's done everything possible to absolutely get every ounce out of this Ole Miss team as they move forward at Tucson.
Chase, following the Tim Elko story has just been fantastic. I love the way that kid plays, the dramatic home runs he's hit, the playing hurt. We've kind of joked that Elko ought to be a verb, when he hit clutch home runs under adverse circumstances. But how crazy has it been just to follow his season, and what has he meant to that program? Because I think he's one of those guys that seems to me like, if you're an Ole Miss fan sitting in the stands, right now, that you're going to be telling your grandkids about this guy one day and all that he did. He just seems like he has elevated himself from great player to kind of like a folk legend in Oxford.
It sounds like a platitude at this point, but he's just such a good guy. He seriously is the person that if you have a daughter, you hope that's the kind of dude that comes home with her. I mean, he's just fantastic. And to see a story where he came in his freshman year as the top rated position player in the class, very highly recruited. And he came in with Tyler Keenan. They played the same position. Well, Tyler Keenan ended up being one of the best 3-year hitters in Ole Miss history. I mean, he put together All-American year after All-American year over the course of his 2.5 years. Obviously, COVID cut the third year short. But Tim wasn't very good. He pressed. He struggled with the fact that Keenan had kind of taken his spot. And he was a non-factor his first couple years on campus. In year 3 in 2020, he might be on his way to like National Player of the Year honors. He and Anthony Servideo and Tyler Keenan really carrying Ole Miss in 2020 prior to the pandemic stopping the season. And he comes into this year, Keenan's not there, Servideo's not there, and he's going to be good. But the way he kind of just lifted everybody up, we always see, Chris, Barry, about how Friday night starters lift up their teams. You've got them going and everybody's kind of, hey, we're going to win tonight. Tim does that from an offensive standpoint in a way that I really haven't seen a whole lot. So when he goes out on April 5th, for anybody who hasn't seen it or is aware of it, it's a really strange play. He's running to first base. He rounds because the throw is bad, and he kind of runs into the first baseman. He's kind of trying to avoid him, and he tears the ACL in his knee. I mean, crying, everybody in tears. The stadium has just gone silent because you hate it for Tim, and then also you're going, hey, the season really in peril now with Tim Elko out. And for the next week or so, knee's swollen, he's going to have surgery, he's out. And then all of a sudden they said, well, some people genetically can play on it. If the swelling goes down, it's potentially possible. Maybe he pinch hits at some point late in the year. Maybe he can come in for one at bat. And he does that at first. And the scene at Swayze, I guess it was against South Carolina, he comes in, standing ovation from the crowd. He ends up popping up. But just seeing him back out there, I felt like it lifted Ole Miss that he was just able to put a uniform and get back on the field. He hits the pinch hit home run against Texas A&M the next weekend. Really, really cool moment. And he's just kept hitting. The knee is bothering him more than he lets on because, frankly, he's a little stiffer now than he was even 3 weeks ago. But he's able to DH. He's able to stay in the game. And it's a fascinating baseball study of analytically how well does somebody have to hit to play who can't run? Because he can't, he's station to station. I mean, there's very little he can do as far as getting to second on a double or getting home from second on a base hit or something like that. But the way the guy's hitting and the things he does for his team, it's worth it just to have him at the plate, have him in the lineup. And, Mike Bianco said on Monday, we keep saying it's legendary or we're amazed at what else he can do because it's becoming every time he does something else, we don't really have the words for it. He had 2 grand slams over the course of the regional. He had 2 home runs on Monday, 2 home runs that they desperately needed to get past Southern Miss, who's a really good offensive club. And I'm not 100% sure he's not coming back next year. I think this Tim Elko story continues on. He's going to have surgery in the offseason. That still is required. It's not like his knee's fixed. But just kind of gauging what his pro potential is, how much he loves the university, how much he's enjoying this. It wouldn't even shock me if you have a 2022 version of Tim Elko.
I saw that at bat against South Carolina. It was on the SEC Network Saturday night. They pinch hit him. The place erupted. I mean, we wrote about it Monday when they won the regional and compared him and Kevin Kopps at Arkansas to kind of folk heroes, in SEC baseball floor. I mean, these people, these Ole Miss fans have embraced him, and this team embraced him. I mean, the game he got hurt was a Monday night after Easter weekend. They had a Sunday off because they played a Thursday, Friday, Saturday at Florida. And he gets hurt on a Monday night against North Alabama, who at the time I don't think had won a game. And you could just kind of see the life of that game kind of go out of them. But when he came in that night, the folks at Ole Miss have really embraced this kid, and he is maybe like a living legend, a folk hero legend for Ole Miss baseball. And David Kellum, who he and I have been friends for many, many years, said on the broadcast the other night he's got 9 home runs with 2 good knees and 7 home runs with a torn ACL. So he's almost got as many home runs on a bum leg as he did with 2 good legs. What does he mean to their program, and how do these fans treat him? I mean, he got a standing ovation in that at bat that he popped up in, and they had him on the SEC network that night, and he said he was just really overwhelmed. He said, I had to actually step out of the batter's box. I was so overwhelmed by the love that these fans show me. How much is he revered by the Ole Miss baseball fans?
As much as any player I've covered over the course of my 15, 16 years. He essentially gets a standing ovation every time he goes to the plate. I mean, it's by far the biggest applause. It's by far the biggest ovation that comes from any player. I mean, usually the all-region team that you read when a team's done celebrating and everybody's kind of leaving the park after a regional, it's sort of just perfunctory and okay, yeah, some golf claps. He was named the most outstanding player of the regional, and it was like an explosion in the stadium prior to everybody leaving, and that kind of says it all right there. I mean, because I was staring at my ballot, and Ole Miss had really 3 options for most outstanding player. Doug Nikhazy picks up a couple wins. He pitches twice. He was phenomenal. If without him, they don't win. Taylor Broadway's on a stretch of baseball that may be better than any closer in the country. He gets all 3 saves over the course of the regional for Ole Miss. But I said, it's him. It's him. The things he did offensively and the things that he just has to get Ole Miss to this point. I mean, it's even without the injury, just the performances that he's putting together would put him up in that kind of that top echelon of guys. But doing it the way he's doing it, being it the guy he is, he's the face of the program. And yeah, I think it's one of those deals where you're going to be talking about this for a while. Ole Miss fans are going to keep a special place with Tim Elko for decades to come.
Yeah, he's 9 for 27 in the postseason. He got 5 home runs, 14 runs batted in. He's got over 1,400 OPS. This is on one knee now.
He can't run. I mean, yeah, seriously.
No.
I mean, he's hobbling out of the box. I mean, he's wearing essentially a football offensive lineman knee brace.
He's got 9 walks and 9 hits. So he's been on base 18 times, and he's been hit by a pitch twice in the postseason. I mean, he's a one base guy. I mean, it literally is going to take, if he gets on base, it's not a home run. It is going to take 3 more hits to get him in, and because he can't run. It's just phenomenal. 1, that he's even trying to play, and 2, that he's able to produce the numbers that he's produced. 10 runs scored in 9 games, and his on base percentage is .526. I mean, what he's done is just incredible in this postseason. And Gonzalez has played well, and Graham has played well, but those are the only 3 guys on the Ole Miss team in the postseason that are hitting over 300, and the rest of the team is 250 or less. Those 3 guys are kind of carrying the team, and which I think makes it even more incredible at what Elko's been able to do with just those 3 guys. I mean, Schottenjay's had some moments, and so has Bench. Some big home runs, but their averages are in the 250s and 230s. But Elko's 333, Graham's 343, Gonzalez is 364 in the postseason. They have 33, if I add right, 33 hits. The rest of the team has 36 hits in the postseason. So those 3 guys are carrying the team. It makes it even more amazing that what Elko's been able to do.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was a big deal. He hasn't done it every game, but when Mike has just moved Elko in front of Graham, it's helped give him a little bit of protection, because otherwise teams can just kind of walk Elko, put him on the bases, and then make Mike make decisions on, hey, do you pull him out of the game here? Do you leave him in the game? When do you move to somebody else? So at least when he put him in front of Graham at times, it makes them pitch to him, because obviously they can't set it up for Kevin Graham.
Chase, what does it take for Hayden Dunhurst to get a little bit more love? I think that he might be the most underrated player in the league. Now, the batting numbers weren't spectacular. He was 384 on base, 439 slugging, but he's also caught and I say caught, he started every one of these games 62 times. I mean, the wear and tear of a catcher, it takes its toll. You see it over the course of the year, and I know his numbers were better, probably a couple of weeks ago than they are now, but he hits, he's patient at the plate, and one thing that really impressed me about him, when I watched their series with Vanderbilt, I felt like he controlled Enrique Bradfield Jr. better than anybody did all year. I just think this kid's a phenomenal player, and I feel like he has not gotten the attention that he probably deserves, even within his own league.
Yeah, he's going to get it next summer when the draft comes. There's no doubt about that. He's the best catch and throw catcher in the league. And I tell you, you're right about his offense, and I think you make the point. He was a really good hitter earlier in the year. He kind of carried Ole Miss there for a little while early on offensively. But the wear and tear and what catching every single day does to a guy on offense, he's tired. His legs go out a little bit. I mean, it does. It affects you mentally and physically on the offensive side, and I think that's what's happening to his batting average, to some of his bats. He had a really rough at bat, I guess, Saturday against Florida State. T.J. McCants had gotten back picked off first base with the bases loaded, and then Dunhurst struck out on a ball that was well out of the strike zone. It was kind of one of those moments of the deflation for the fan base going, oh, God, kind of blew an opportunity there in a close game. But what Dunhurst is having to overcome every day to catch, to handle this pitching staff that's been all in flux and all over the place, yeah, he is. He's one of the most underrated players in the league. He has controlled run games. I mean, frankly, Bradfield's one of the few guys that's even run on him. A lot of teams will not run. They just completely kill that part of the game when Ole Miss is facing them because he's going to throw you out. He absolutely is the best catch and throw guy. And, Ole Miss has a history of really good catchers. They've got a bench award winner in the last 5 or 6 years. They've got a couple other bench award finalists. But if I've got to pick one guy, offensive and defense, to handle it, I'm picking Hayden Dunhurst over some of those other options.
You mentioned Broadway a minute ago. His postseason has been really phenomenal. He's got 4 saves and 5 appearances, has not allowed a run, and 13 strikeouts and 1 walk. What has been his difference? I know there was a couple of times during the season, Mississippi State, he had a rough outing. He had a rough outing against LSU, had a rough outing against Arkansas. What's been the change in Broadway in the postseason that's gotten him back to the Taylor Broadway that we all know?
Yeah, the run really started after Texas A&M. He had a difficult game against Texas A&M, and since that point, he's had 9 appearances. Ole Miss has won all 9 of those games. He's thrown 15 innings, given up 1 run, 21 strikeouts, 2 walks during that stretch. He has a rubber arm. He can throw back-to-back days. He can kind of go in whenever Mike Bianco needs him. He was good, but not great in 19. And then coming in for 2020, they did tons of kind of technical work with him. They had Rapsodo, they had TrackMan stuff, they had the pitching lab from Wake Forest come in where they help with tunneling and what's the best pitch to go with this pitch, what should your entire repertoire be. Broadway really embraced that. He increased some ride on his fastball. He's just increased some velocity as well. He's up into the mid 90s at times. And what makes him so good as a closer, because you don't see this very often, is he actually has the stuff of a starter. He has excellent command. He can throw 4 different pitches. And he can beat you multiple ways. Mike Bianco talked about it on Monday night. He can throw that 90-mile-an-hour, that mid-90s fastball by you. He has a really sharp slider that can be a swing and miss pitch. But then he also can throw the slider and the curveball for strike, and he can even show you a changeup. I don't know how necessary that is in his short outings, but when Broadway doesn't have something working for him, he can go to something else. You don't see that out of a lot of bullpen guys. You definitely don't see that out of a lot of max effort closers. But it gives him an extra thing where even on days when he's a little tired, he can beat you this way. He's an ultimate competitor. I do think that plays at college level between he and Nikhazy. And he's just embraced everything possible to get a little better. And that's inched a little better, an inch a little better, and a little inch a little better. I think some of the reason he's back to the Taylor Broadway is frankly how Mike Bianco's call pitches. You look at Texas A&M and Brazil hit that walk-off that beat them in a swing game there on the final day of that series. But they were nibbling so much. They had walked the batter right before that. Ole Miss is kind of bad at times about wasting 0-2 pitches way out of the zone that aren't anywhere close to strikes. And I think what it was doing was putting Broadway in some bad counts at times. I think what they've done now is, hey, no, we're just going to go right at you. We're going to throw. We're going to fill up the zone and make you hit it. I think it's giving Broadway more confidence. It's taking him out of some bad counts, and it's kind of letting the stuff do the work a little bit.
Well, the other arm, of course, who's been fantastic, you mentioned it, Doug Nikhazy, who was hurt a little bit earlier in the year. He has just been probably within league games in regional play, probably the most effective starter in the league. Now, you've had some other guys in Leiter and Rocker that have maybe pitched a little bit more, but he's just unhittable, Chase. And I'm trying to think who he reminds me of because I watch his delivery, and he's a lefty. He's probably, 90 to 91 with the fastball. Maybe you've seen him higher, but he just, to me, looks like a guy that you cannot see the ball out of his arm. It's not like as pronounced as, say, maybe a Tim Lincecum or somebody like that, or maybe, Hideo Nomo, but just, he's got this thing like he reminds me of somebody that I've seen at the major league level, but I can't place it. But whatever the case, I just watch him throw. He is so consistent. And as you said, Ole Miss is not where it is without him.
He competes more than any pitcher I've ever covered. And I mean, I can factor in Lance Lynn into this, Drew Pomeranz. If I'm picking between Ole Miss pitchers to have to go out and win one game, I think I'm picking Doug Nikhazy. I mean, you look at what he's done in the postseason throughout his career. You hate that last year robbed him of another opportunity. He goes 7 innings. He beat Florida State on Saturday. As a freshman, he holds Clemson to 1 run in 7 innings in a regional. Ole Miss wins the game in Fayetteville in the Super Regional in day 2. He just doesn't get fazed by anything. And no matter what's working or not working, he's going to find a way to compete, and he's going to find a way to get you out. He can do it in multiple ways. He is a more, from an Ole Miss baseball standpoint, and Chris, you'll remember this name, Barry will too, just because you're baseball guys. He's a more talented version of Christian Trent, who Ole Miss kind of carried Ole Miss to the College World Series in 2014. He was an LSU transfer that went undefeated in SEC play, but left-handed, just compete. That is never, a moment that's never too big. And with Doug, it's what makes him so good in college, and it's what frankly limits his potential as a prospect for the draft coming up. He throws across his body pretty badly. It hides the baseball, but scouts don't like it. Scouts are worried that if he's throwing every 5 days instead of every 7, is he going to be 86 to 88 instead of 89 to 91 or whatever Doug is most of the time? But at some point, getting outs in the SEC is getting outs in the SEC. He can do it by early contact. He can do it with strikeouts. I mean, he tied the Ole Miss school record for strikeouts in a game against Florida State in 7 innings. Drew Pomeranz did it in 9. It was 16. Doug did it 16 in 7. So he can punch you out with a lot of different things. He is very deceptive. Like I said, he throws 4 pitches, and he'll figure out what's working early in the game. What was so mature about Doug against Florida State on Saturday is that he had no curveball early on at all. So he completely threw it away for the first 3 or 4 innings, and then comes back to it in the 4th, 5th, and 6th. He ends up getting 3 strikeouts looking off that curveball. He can manage a game as well as any college pitcher I've seen. And, yeah, I think you're right. I mean, look, does he have the overall talent of a Leiter or a Rocker? No. But from just a result standpoint, he probably is your SEC pitcher of the year from a starting pitching standpoint if we're not factoring in Kevin Cobb.
What I like about him is the fact that he's made 15 appearances. He's had 13 decisions, 11 wins, and 2 losses. But another thing I liked was Saturday night, he gave up the 2 home runs. That was in the 5th inning, and he came back and struck out the next 5 hitters in a row. Closed out the game for them when they took him out in the 7th inning. But didn't let that affect him. He's behind, but his team came back and got the lead for him, and then he punches out the side in the 7th inning. I think that was a big moment for him and a big lift for Ole Miss. But he just seems like he's just that big game guy. He's looking for that one big at bat every game, and to show that he's the dominant force on the mound. And that was one thing that really stood out for me Saturday night in his appearance against Florida State. I mean, just how he was able to shake off those 2 home runs in that 1 inning and finish the game on a strong note.
It was the story of Saturday night, because when Florida State went home run, hit, home run to take a 3-2 lead there in the 5th, you think Nikhazy's reeling, his velocity was down. I mean, to the point that Mike was getting the bullpen up, and he thought, hey, this is going sideways for Ole Miss in a hurry. And, yeah, he just found something. The velocity ticked back up. He said that he had to dig a little deeper. He had to find another gear. I forget the exact quote that he used or what platitude that he used. But he did. He struck out 2 of the next 3 in the 5th he struck out the next 2 to get out of the inning. He strikes out 2 out of 3 in the 6th, and then he strikes out the side in the 7th. At the time, we think finished his Swayze Field career. Now he comes in relief on Monday against Southern Miss. But even coming off in the sixth, Ole Miss is down 3-2 at the time. Nikhazy fist pumps off the mound, looks up and screams at the crowd, "We're not done yet." And the crowd had kind of gone listless. It had gotten quiet and very nervous at Swayze Field. And even from just an energy standpoint, Doug comes off the field, kind of gives a little jolt that the crowd needed. And yeah, they take the lead back in the next half inning off Tim Elko's bat.
Chase, I watched Ole Miss in Hoover almost all the time. I saw most of their games, and the story down there was pitching. They got great outings out of Derek Diamond and Drew McDaniel, and also Tyler Myers. But Diamond and McDaniel at times have looked really good, and at times they just have those nightmare box score lines. Now, I've watched a lot of games at Swayze this year, and you can't help but notice the ball gets out of there pretty quickly. And right now, you just have home runs an issue across the board in college baseball. The ball was flying out of ballpark. So this problem not new to Ole Miss or not unique to Ole Miss, I guess a good way to say it. But I want to ask you, if they can get through Arizona, is Ole Miss a lot tougher team in Omaha because the ball doesn't get out nearly as much there? It's a spacious park. These guys have good strikeout numbers. They have decent walk numbers for college pitchers. I'm just wondering if Ole Miss gets to Omaha, given the dynamics of that team. Now, it's going to take away some of the long ball on offense, but does that park maybe make Ole Miss a tougher team there than it would maybe in Oxford, just because you have these power arms who are just giving up long balls like crazy at home? I'm just wondering what you think. If the Rebels can get that far, how does a park like that change the dynamic of that team?
It does help them because, yeah, it's going to play a lot like Hoover. I mean, we sort of joked, but it's not completely a joke. I mean, maybe Ole Miss should put the regional bids in Hoover for the SEC tournament because they cover a pretty good bit of ground in the outfield. They pitch to that park because they have some fly ball pitchers. I mean, Derek Diamond, you mentioned, his one biggest flaw is he can just not keep the ball in the ballpark. He's given up a ton more home runs than the other pitcher on that staff. I expect him to start probably game one just because the way rest works out against Arizona. Yeah, I think TD Ameritrade would be a better park for them to play in versus Swayze versus some other things because of what you mentioned. I worry a little bit about them offensively in that park. So yeah, I don't know. It's like you mentioned. It's the offense gets lessened, the pitching staff gets better. So I don't know really where that nets out. But yeah, from a pitching staff standpoint, there's no doubt in my mind because look, Tyler Myers was very good in the regional. Derek Diamond was fine. He is starting to kind of find himself a little bit, and it's somebody Ole Miss is going to need because he's probably your Friday night starter next season for the Rebels. But Hoover also, I feel like, gave them confidence, which was good, but also a little bit of false sense of security. I think that some of those outings, some of those innings, hey, look how well they pitched. Well, they hit balls that in Hoover were outs or in Hoover were doubles versus at Swayze, those balls were just out of the park as home runs. So I think that was the key was, yes, they got everything they needed out of Hoover. They got some confidence. They got on a little bit of a roll. They were playing well going into the regional. But I don't know that the pitching performances were completely indicative of what they could have expected when they came back home and were no longer at the Hoover Met.
You mentioned his home runs. He gave up 6 home runs in the regular season. He's given up 5 in the case he has in the postseason. And you guys are talking about TD Ameritrade. They're going to Arizona this weekend in the Super Regional, and they're going to play in a ballpark that is similar to Hoover and is similar to TD Ameritrade. Arizona playing at an old minor league, converted an old minor league facility to their ballpark. It's where the movie Major League was filmed. It is a huge, spacious ballpark. You look at Arizona's numbers, they have 62 home runs as a team this year. Several wrong stats. Ole Misses. They have 60. They do 62 home runs. Jacob Berry leads them with 15. Daniel Susac has 12. That park could play well for Ole Miss this weekend as well. It's a big ballpark in Arizona and could be to their liking, a la Hoover and TD Ameritrade Park. So they're going to get a big park this weekend when they go on the road and play in Arizona.
Yeah, really a challenge for Ole Miss this weekend. Arizona, out of major conference teams, they lead the country in runs, on-base percentage, batting average, hits, and are second in slugging percentage behind Vanderbilt.
Wow. Yeah, they are definitely an offensive team. I'm looking. They've scored 498 runs, given up 305. Home runs, they've hit 62 and only given up 23. They've walked 307 times, which is also a lot. But I'm going to be interested to watch that one because I think it's a fascinating matchup. Chase, I know you've got to go here in a second. There were two kids I wanted to get to on Ole Miss we haven't talked about, and they're both freshmen, and I've loved watching both of them play. Jacob Gonzalez, their shortstop, who you look at the fielding percentage, he's fielding 930, but then you watch him and you're like, man, this kid is outstanding. He's got a cannon of an arm. He's got a gifted bat. TJ McCants, I think, has tailed off a little bit lately, but I've watched him play this year. He can do a little bit of everything. I've liked his play in center. It's not often that you get two impact freshmen who are as good as those guys are right off the bat. And I know that McCants didn't play some time earlier in the year, but what do you think of those two in their future? And I think Gonzalez in particular is going to be a really, really top draft prospect when I guess he's draft eligible 2 years from now.
He is, yes, that's correct.
Yeah, just your thoughts on those guys, your future at Ole Miss, and maybe beyond.
Gonzalez, yeah, he's one of those potential top 10 pick kind of guys. I want to see. The only question I have on Gonzalez a little bit is he can play the position, but as he gets a little more filled out, I wonder if he becomes a third baseman. He can hit enough to be a third baseman, and I wonder if he becomes a plus glove third baseman instead of a shortstop. I'm not sure what goes on there for him, but he does. He makes some instinctual plays, some dazzling plays in the field, but that bat, it plays as well as any freshman I've seen. I mean, Jacob Gonzalez, incredibly special. I know at least after the SEC tournament, he was leading the SEC in hits. He's currently got 88 right now. He's 4 away from cracking the top 10 list in school history for a season. It takes 92 to do that. I think the school record's 101 or 102, so he'd have to really get hot and almost have to go deep in Omaha for that. But Gonzalez has keyed this thing. He hasn't really had a slump the entire season. He's been good throughout, and we talked about it a little while ago. Ole Miss is kind of a top half of the lineup team. They don't get a ton out of the bottom half. They have to score. And you're keying on a freshman to do that. He's led off. He's hitting the 2-hole. He's hitting the 3-hole. He's wherever Mike puts him. The dude just hits. He puts together professional at-bats. And if you're buying stock into somebody, it's absolutely Jacob Gonzalez. TJ McCants has helped this team at times when they absolutely had to have it. Yeah, he didn't play early in the year. He's actually an infielder. So, look, he's going to have some screw-ups in center field. He's never played out there before. It's all new to him. He's roaming an area that he just does not understand. He's going to have some routing issues, but he's going to make up for it with athleticism. He's going to make some big catches. He's hit the freshman wall a little bit. I feel like he kind of needs a few days off, not from games, but just in general, to kind of reset. I feel like he's making a few more mental errors. His at-bats have gone down. I just think the stress of the season, the stress of the circumstances that he's playing in has gotten to him a little bit. That happens to freshmen all the time. It's not really uncommon. They just got to figure out what to do with him because, like I said, he's a shortstop that's playing center field. So do you continue to, get him in center field, develop him out there, turning him into a potential elite defensive center fielder over time? Or do you potentially move Gonzalez to third, move McCants to short, and that's the left side of your infield for the next 2 years? I think that's going to be Mike's decision. But no, they're both going to hit. They're both special guys. I mean, from a recruiting class that we didn't really talk about a ton of players coming in. It was a good class, but it wasn't one of these top couple ranked classes that Ole Miss has had over the years. They've saved the season. Without those two, I can't imagine where Ole Miss would be.
Chase, I appreciate you joining us today. You guys have got a lot going on with regionals. I know you guys are the best in the business at Ole Miss. You and Neil McCready are. And I wanted to give you a moment to advertise your product, tell us where to follow you on Twitter, and anything that you want to leave us with before we end the show today.
Yeah, on Twitter, at Rivals Chase. Obviously, as Chris mentioned, rebelgrove.com, olemiss.rivals.com, baseball, football, basketball, football recruiting as always. And then we have a network of podcasts, our flagship show, the Oxford Exxon podcast. You can find that on Apple, Spotify, wherever it is you listen to your podcast.
All right. For Barry Allen and Chase Parham, I'm Chris Lee, host of The 14. Be sure and check out our content at southeastern14.com. Thank you for listening to the Wednesday episode. We will see you again on Thursday.